Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Post Military Podcast. In this episode, Eric and I discuss his time in the Air Force, how he prepared for his transition out of the military, finally, the realities of rebuilding your identity in this next chapter of your life. As always, my goal is to provide a new perspective to our listeners who are preparing for the next transition in their life as well. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States.
Hey everybody out there, welcome back to the Post Military Podcast. I'm Billy, and today I'm being joined by Eric Meng. Eric, what's up, dude? It's nice to see
Billy.
you.
Thanks for having me on here.
Hey, I'm happy to have you. So
Awesome.
well, let's get it started right away. Eric, let's start off real easy. Tell everyone out there a little bit about your military experience and what led you to transition.
Sweet, yeah. So I was Billy's classmate, class of 2016 at USAFA. Graduated with a computer science degree. Went to tech school, same class as Billy. But after cyber training, I went to Misawa, Japan. I was there at the 35th Comm Squad, just doing normal communication stuff. That was more of like a managerial role, like a PM, like project manager role more than anything else, especially as like a first lieutenant. So that gave me like, sort of like the leadership experience. And then my second year there, I was asked to be the group exec. So I was the group executive officer for the sport group. And for those that don't know what a group exec is, you're basically an 06's, to put it lightly, like right-hand man, pretty much. And so like you help enforce like all the admin stuff. You take care of the stuff that they can't have time for. So really, really stressful, and like essentially you're juggling a lot of things. Like that requires a lot of organizational skills. And after that, I think my taste buds were kind of sour for wanting to doing anything leadership or managerial. So I was like, well, for my next assignment, I want to be more technical. I have a computer science degree. I haven't been able to use that yet. I'm in the cybersecurity field. I need to put these skills to use, or else I'll just end up becoming a mid-level manager somewhere and just being bored with life. So I applied to CNODP, which was the NSA's like internship program for active duty military. I was able to get in. I was supposed to be class of 2022. And I say I was supposed to be because my clearance took so long. I ended up just being like, all right, they gave me a tour while I was waiting for my clearance. So I was able to do like some cyber stuff. And then by the time my clearance had finished, they were like, hey, we're going to put you in the class of 2023 instead. And it's a 3-year program, and it's super technical. You're supposed to be like doing tours, a 1-year tour in like specific offices, developing your cyber skills. And for me, I was like, well, that kind of pushes my own timeline. And after having a taste of the Intel community, I wasn't super, super interested in it anymore, because from the military perspective, there wasn't a lot of growth afterwards. Essentially, like when you finish the program, you're a captain and you're highly technical. Like you have all these technical skills, but you're not able to use any of them because you're essentially just thrown into a different like cyber shop somewhere else, and you're that leader over there, which is fine, and that's cool and all. But I think for me, I wanted more agency with my life, and so at that point, I had told them that I was going to get out in the next year, and they were like, "That's cool." I had great leadership; they were cool with everything. They let me do a skill bridge in my last 6 months, so. My last 6 months, I did my skill bridge with a company called Parsons, and they do government contracting. And I was able to do some cyber stuff with Parsons. And then when I left, it was exactly 5 years to the date of graduation. So I was a hard 5 and dive. And essentially got out, put on my civilian clothes and went into like the team that I worked right next to when I was at the agency. And I did that for about like 10 months before I was like, this isn't really interesting me anymore. And crypto and Web3 was where my heart was and what I was doing outside of work. And so I decided to apply to Coinbase, got in, and I've been working there ever since. So almost a year now at Coinbase. But
Did they pay
that's where I
you
am.
in
And
Bitcoin?
what's that?
Do they pay you in Bitcoin? Like, do you
You
get normal
can if
money?
you want to, but my mortgage needs cash, so I'm not accepting.
Yeah.
I'm not accepting
respect-
Bitcoin
That's awesome.
right now. But I know there's a couple people I know that do. But
That's wild. Those are wild people.
yeah, it is an interesting industry overall.
For sure. Okay, so when you kind of knew that you were going to transition out, you're waiting for your clearance. You're just like, this is not, the NSA is not as tight as I want it to be. What did you start doing to prepare for your transition?
Man, that's a good question. I think for me, mainly, it was just like it was a lot of soul searching. It was half soul searching, half like sprucing up your resume and like really like making sure that you did have the skills, because like for a lot of us, especially coming straight out of the academy, like we never really had to worry about finding a job. Like everything was kind of like given to us, and we just had to put the shoes on pretty much. But in that preparation, it was a little bit like, all right, what do I actually want to do? Like I can do whatever. Like I could freaking work at Panera Bread if I wanted to. Like there's nothing stopping me from doing that. So really it was like, all right, what am I really interested in? Like what can I really like you know, sit down and do, not for the rest of my life, but just like enough to like get into the civilian world and figure it out from there. And so a lot of it was like writing down like what skills I actually had, what I was interested in, reaching out to my friends who were in the civilian world and being like, hey, like, what's it like out there? Like, what should I be applying to? What should I be having on my resume and stuff like that? And so it was an interesting time because, there was a bit of me at that point in my life where I was kind of like, well, should I just like make a career pivot? Like I'm still in my mid 20s. Like I could do something else entirely that interested me. Like I could go into business, I could go into sales, I could go into like more of the management side. And so, I had these technical skills, but at the end of the day, what dictated where I went to was the pay, essentially. It was like, all right, what's the highest paying job that you can land on the East Coast that you could easily go into without having to do much work? And obviously that was back into cyber pretty much. And that's the thing is like, I think as much as I hate to like go where the money goes, I view money as a tool still. Like I still view money as like, it's a nice to have, and like it'll get you out of like sticky situations and out of things that you don't want to do. I don't think that like you should center your life around it, especially like focusing your happiness around it. A lot of people do, like especially in the cyber field, like they pay big bucks here. I mean, it more than anyone else as well. And so it's the golden handcuffs. It's hard to like keep perspective of like, all right, what is my goal here? What are my long-term goals? Like, I'm just only here to make money for this amount of time and then potentially get out and do something else. But for me at the time, contractor out before finding my footing more in the private sector.
Yeah. Would did you, when you were going out and you were talking to different people, when you were preparing for your transition, what do you think? Did you get any like really good pieces of advice that kind of shaped your perspective of pivot into contracting, then rotate into a private sector type role? Or what did you kind of have that? Did you have that mentality going into the transition of like, I'm just gonna get I'm gonna get paid. I'm gonna, and you obviously had it sounds like you really had the goals of, I'm gonna stay on the East Coast. I'm gonna get paid.
I
Like
think,
how did that start off, or how did that develop? I guess is the better question.
yeah, I mean, I did talk with a lot of like people, and there were a lot of like, and one of my biggest pieces of advice is really like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like, seriously, like, ask someone who's gone through it before, especially like other grads or like people that are where you want to be, because you'd be surprised in like how quickly you can get there. Because a lot of people think like, oh, I need to get like an MBA first. I need to get all these certifications. I need to go through like all these hoops. And it's like, I'm sure you know as well. Like, it's like, you don't really have to do any of that. Like, really, it's about who you know and like the experience and being able to present that in a package that convinces the right people to make
Definitely.
those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, yeah, no,
go ahead.
to give people some background on me, like I graduated with a degree in history, and I work as a cybersecurity consultant now that I'm out of the military. And while I was in the military, I taught college graduates basic cybersecurity. So like it
Yep.
it really does not, like, there is no
Yeah.
path, especially in the
Yeah.
cyber field. So,
Yeah. And I think that's what makes like people unique here is like, this is really like one of the few industries, like tech in general, where like you could come from any background. Like, it really doesn't matter. It's what you bring to the table and like your attitude about it. Um and and that's what really matters more than anything else. Because like the people that are actually doing all the real hacking and like exploits and like exfiltration worth millions and billions of dollars, like none of those people have a CISP. None of those people have like a master's in comp sci or anything like that. Like, you don't have to. I think one of the best pieces of advice was like basically that. It was like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, you don't have to go through like all these hoops thinking like, oh, okay, this is the perfect formula to get to where I want. That's not the case. It doesn't have to be that way. It's really about your attitude about it. Honestly, it's about your attitude. It's about being a go-getter. It's about like being like, all right, well, this is where I want to be. Let me talk to people. Let me reach out. Like, make some moves. And I think, you know, part of it goes to the original thing I was talking about, which is like figuring out like some soul searching, like figuring out like who you want to be, who you really are. Because for the entire time while you're in the military tells you who you are. The military tells you exactly what to do and who to be, and you don't really have to think for yourself, or you rarely have to. And and that's definitely like a mindset that one has to shape and really own themselves when they're transitioning out. And that's not something that like you can learn in like the TAPS class, that or like even a skill bridge when you're trying to get out.
yeah.
So
Do do you
yeah.
think kind of going into, I want to dive into that because I think it's a really important and a completely untalked about, um uh what's the word, like unintended, not an unintended, but an effect of leaving the military that no one talks about is the your loss, like, of identity. Um for you, I mean, I know your background really well. Like, you were in a military school, then you went into the Air Force, and then you got out. So what was that separation process like for you? Because like, even though like you really left behind a lot of formative parts of yourself in your adult life when you left the military. So can you describe to people like what was that like, and what is that currently like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think especially like, we signed on to the military at 18 years old, and we basically were locked in until we were at least 26, 27 maybe. And so like, that's a really big commitment in our life. And like when we were 18 at that time, getting into the academy was like one of the most biggest accomplishments of your life, and still is. Like being able to get in and then get through those 4 years was not an easy task. Um, and so like for a lot of, for most of, every academy grad's life, even to this day, like that's a very big part of your identity is being an academy grad, and also like being an officer, being an Air Force officer, and like being proud of the long blue line. And it's not to say that I'm not proud of it or that I regret going there, but you bring up a good point. Like it's about like, okay, well, that was your identity before. What's your identity now that you all left that behind? Like now that you're out of the military entirely, I can't go on to base anymore and like in the uniform and like get into like any building. Like that doesn't work like that. I can't even just walk into the BX. Like it doesn't work like that. When I was so used to shopping at the BX and commissary for like a majority of my career. And so like now I find myself, amongst the normal folks, and it's definitely it's definitely not talked about enough, and I'm glad that this is a conversation we're bringing up here, because like people struggle. Like I definitely, like, I wouldn't say I had the easiest time like transitioning. I definitely had it better than other people that I know. But like for a lot of people, like they're still soul searching. They're still figuring out what interests them and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, honestly. Like that is the best place to be, because, you know, if you know exactly what you want to do, if you know exactly who you want to be, like you're just going to be that, and you're just going to be boring. Versus like you change throughout life. Like different things suit you at different times. Like when we were 18 to 22 years old, the academy suited us the best because that was our mindset. That was our type A personality. And then in the Air Force, various parts of your career, like and what you did, that suited you at that time. And then now we're like almost hitting 30s, if not in our 30s, and like starting families. Like most of us are married now and stuff like that. We're family men, and like your entire priorities change in life. Everything changes, right? And like that's not something that you're taught in class. That's not something that like you can sit down in a classroom setting and take it all in and learn. You just literally have to go through that journey to learn. Um, but but yeah, I mean, like finding out like your identity and like figuring out like who you are, what you want to do and stuff is not an easy task. And I think for me, what made it easier was, like I said before, like just like sitting down, being like, all right, what skills do I have and what am I interested in? Let's just go in that general direction. What's paying the bills, like let's go in that direction, and then we'll figure it out from there. But I think the thing that like, especially in our generation being millennials, like I think it's okay to like still not know and like still like figure it out along the way. I mean, that's what we're good at. Like none of us are sticking at the same company for more than like 5 years. Like that's absurd. I have never heard of that actually. Like I don't know any friends that have stuck around at the same company for more than 5 years. We're always moving around. We're changing about, like, it's like I was saying earlier, like it's different needs suit you at different times of your life. And it's okay to like still try to figure that out. You shouldn't need to have answers for everything, and that's okay. I think honestly, like that is a part of life that's very important, that like, figuring out what fills that cup at that time. And it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you don't know at that time.
Yeah. Um in my personal opinion, I think that one of the issues with the not an issue, but one of the hard parts about the military as an organization is that it's all encompassing. Like so much of your life is wrapped up in it. Like your friends are military, you get paid in the military. Most people live on a military base. You move because the military told you to, and then all of a sudden you stop. Like it all ends. And uh, how and I think what a lot of people try to do is they try and find a one-to-one translation. Like, so the military gave me everything, so what's the next thing that's going to give me everything? do you think that it is possible in your do you think that it is possible to find a one-to-one replacement for the military, and if so, have you found it?
I mean, that's a really good point as well, because that was part of the hesitation on like whether I should push the button to get out or not. Like a lot of us, and maybe you can attest to this as well. Like we're kind of scared at first. Like it's like shit, man. Like what's out there? Like I don't know. Like why would I leave the comfort of captain's pay and BAH for the unknown? Like
Where
when
they'll
there's
tell
no
me,
guarantee that.
yeah, and they tell you
Yeah, exactly.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's no guarantee that I'm going to be making the same amount or that, I'm going to be getting the same benefits. Like that's all up in there. Like I didn't even know how healthcare worked. I didn't even know how private healthcare worked, man. Like I was like, shit, I got to pay a copay for stuff. Like what? So, so yeah, like I think, there is no one-to-one. I think one-to-one is what you define it to be. There's no company that's going to cradle you and be like, we're all family and like take care of you until you're retired and you get a fat pension until the day you die. Like that doesn't exist outside the government. If you want that, stay in the government, stay in the military. But like, in the civilian side, we take the chances, we take the risks, and like we pursue what interests us. And I think it's up to every person to define how they want to fill those needs. So like for instance, like yeah, like I make good money at Coinbase. That definitely pays the bills and gives me good benefits. But like in terms of friends and like you know family and like going out and stuff, like I'm a remote worker as well. Like I don't have friends on my team that live anywhere near me, not even in the same state. And so like I have to make friends as an adult. Making friends as an adult in your late 20s and early 30s is fucking hard. Like, and like, all my friends are still military. Like, I'll be honest. Like, all my friends are like 90% of my friends are mostly military guys still that are either in this area or, or we're in the military. There's that same common ground to start off on. But like, but yeah, like, all that one-to-one is what you define it as. And like, you don't ever expect that to happen if you leave the military. Like that's a company taking you in and like cradling you and giving you a pension. That doesn't exist. That just straight up is non-existent. And like same with friends too. Like you got to work hard at those relationships. Like sometimes you have shitty coworkers and like and that's okay. And like you don't have to be friends with them. Just be cordial. But yeah, in short, yeah, there's no one-to-one outside of the government, pretty much.
Do you think that it was hard for you at first? Like I personally believe that it's almost impossible to find a job post military that has the same built-in level of like purpose. Do you find that are you in a job that you think like fulfills you with purpose, or if not, which it's totally okay, like no offense Coinbase for any of you listening out there, how have you kind of dealt with the fact that like you punch the clock, you're getting paid good money, but at the end of the day you're kind of just like getting, at least what I found working for Amazon now is like getting paid doesn't exactly fill me with like patriotic fervor like the military did. So how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, because like I'll be honest, like for those of you out there that are like trying to fulfill that, like either go back to the government or go as a contractor. You're not going to find that in the private sector. In the private sector, you're as valuable as you make the company that money, right? Like you bring in business value and they make money because you bring that value. And then they also pay you in exchange. It's a capitalist system. And that's fine. That's how the system works. But yeah, to your point, like it is tough to find that kind of fulfillment, right? Like, especially when before you didn't have to worry about any of that. So you could just focus on like, all right, how do I protect the United States? How do I make us look good? How do I fight for my brothers and sisters? Um, and so, on the outside, it's definitely a lot more different than that. And my piece of advice, and this was my like, this is the secret sauce. If you're ever at any interview and they ask you like why you're in this industry or like why you want to work here, this is why I tell them. Like, I think the old adage of, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that's very outdated now. I think, especially with our generation, the rate at which technology is changing and the rate at which, companies are changing and laying off people as well. Like, that's not possible. I mean, if it is, amazing, great, that's awesome. And definitely keep that. But I think the adage should be changed into find problems you enjoy solving and you'll never be bored. And that's the mindset that I went into the civilian world. And like, what are some problems I enjoy solving? Like, what are some problems that like I'm not counting the clock until I punch out every single day? And that's what brought me here to Coinbase. And like, that Coinbase offers me those kinds of problems that I enjoy solving and that, fulfill me in those ways. That way I'm not like, counting down the clock and trying to punch out. But that's my biggest piece of advice is like, basically look at it from that mindset instead of just like fulfilling those basic needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that it is important? So problem solving is great. But I mean, people can find problems to solve in a lot of different ways. Like, I mean, shoot, like if you really dig video games, like that's like those are problems that you enjoy solving. I wouldn't recommend most people go be video game streamers though. But
Mhm.
do you think that there is a need for veterans to pursue, I don't want to say higher calling because that's that's a very like woo, but like
Mhm.
what do you think veterans need to do to kind of replace that overarching purpose that we had in the military that we don't have anymore? Because I
Yeah.
think the problems, I almost look at solving problems as like it's almost like it's a short term solution, but like what else is
Mhm.
there? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It just goes back to that soul searching part. Like, what are you really passionate about? Like, if you really are passionate about cybersecurity and you want to make it a better place and like all that kind of stuff, like you can make that your calling, or like what you're doing right now, Billy, like helping out other veterans and like helping them figure that out. Like that could also be a calling. Like, I think it's really up to the person to define and like really figure out within themselves like what truly makes them passionate, especially after the military. Like, I mean, it's easy for the government to tell us, like, and the DoD to be like, all right, this is our enemy, this is our mission, this is our main strategy. Like, we're all here, one fight, one team, kind of a deal. But when you're on your own on the outside, and trust me, especially like if you are a single adult male, like it can be very lonely. Like a lot of men, especially like if you look at all the data out there, like we only get lonelier over time. Like our as we get busier with our lives, as we start to lose perspective of things, like you know, especially leaving the military, like when you've had something that you were so passionate about, or like you were on the same page as literally every other person working with you, and then to be somewhere else where that's not the case anymore, yeah, it gets very lonely, and that mindset's very daunting. But I mean, it's a hard question to answer. Like if you could answer that, I mean,
yeah, then you'd be the smartest person in the room for sure. Right?
exactly,
Yeah.
right? Like yeah, like I don't think there is a hard set answer for any of these questions that
No.
you're asking, Billy. I think it's up for each person to find. I think the most important thing that each person can do for themselves is to make sure that they have the tools and understand that they have people that they can reach out to for help as well, and providing those resources to the person. That's the most you can do. That's the best you can do. um Because at the end of the day, like, you know, what inspires me to keep working at Coinbase is the fact that I love blockchain technology, and I love, like, you know, cryptocurrencies, and I love seeing where this space is going. And that's what really drives me, and my overall arching mindset before, or now that's been replaced, is like, I want to make sure Web3 is secure for everyone. That is my passion. That is my goal. I want that to be the end product for me. And that can change later on, and that's totally okay. Um, but for a lot of people out there, like, if you're not, especially if you have like a career that does not give you hard skills like cyber does, like cyber has easily the most translatable skills to the outside. But like, if you're like a maintenance person, or like you're in like FSS or something like that, where like it's hard to acquire like those like hard set raw skills, it's definitely tougher. It's definitely an uphill battle that, like, it's like, okay, well, like, what else do I have? Like, can I go into management? Can I like do something else entirely? And I think for those people, that's probably the toughest position to be in, honestly. Because like, mainly it's not a one-to-one on the outside. There's no one-to-one for, you know, any of those other career fields. I mean, it's easy to say it's a one-to-one for cyber. I mean, there's everyone wants cyber, especially if you're a tech company, and you know, they're all paying big bucks. But for those other career fields, it's definitely a lot tougher. And I think for those people, like, they got to really dig down deep. They got to really dig down deep to figure out like what really drives them and motivates them. I think, like, what I've noticed at least is like a lot of people still stick with like quasi government kind of roles. Like, they either go to like a different agency or work for somewhere else underneath the government, and that's completely okay. And I think, honestly, like, that is a safe landing spot, and that's a good place to be until you figure it out, like what you're really passionate about and what you want to do. But overall, yeah, I mean, it's up for each person to decide.
How to the I mean, I think that this is going to be advice that's applicable to everyone, but especially for people who you say don't have like really good one-to-one translatable skills. If you had to give a general piece of advice, how long do you think how early should people start thinking about their transition and like what skills they need to acquire to get out? And then what other tools? Well, let's start there, and then I'll get to the next part. So,
Yeah.
how long should people be looking out into the future, honestly, in your opinion?
Oh man, 2 years, I would say. Like, if you know it's your last assignment, you need to be like preparing as soon as you start that last assignment. Like, honestly, like, do not procrastinate on that stuff. Like, and that's and it leads into the next thing of like, okay, well, what do I prepare for that long? Like, if I got like 2+ years to like prepare for my exit, what do I do during that time? And the most important thing to do, start networking, start making connections, start talking to people. Because at the end of the day, like, we have the science and research on it. You getting a job is like 30% you actually having the skills, and 70% convincing the team and interviewer and hiring manager that you're fit for that role. And that comes down to people skills. That comes down to your emotional intelligence skills. That comes down to your networking ability, more than anything else. Like, why is it that frat guys and sorority girls always end up in successful positions? It's because they network. It's because they have those connections, and like, and like it, and then they hire like the nerdy, like, you know, like people that did comp sci to like build out all the things for them. And that's how the world works. I think it's more important to network and develop those connections than anything else. So like, number one, start talking to people, start making a LinkedIn, start figuring out, like, getting your feet wet with like, all right, what opportunities are out there. talk to recruiters, like let them know that you're ready to leave at like this specific time, and like they'll be like, okay, well, let me like give you a spiel of like what our company does. In the meantime, you guys can think about it, and like, and then what else after you networking or while you're networking, look at open roles, like look at the open careers that you are interested in, or of companies that you might be interested in working at, and look at what those skills require. Look at the requirements, look at the nice to haves of that job role, and figure out like how you can start meeting those needs. Like one of them for getting into this role at Coinbase was like, you know, like being able to write blogs and stuff like that. And so thankfully I had already started like writing stuff beforehand because I was like passionate about it, and like that was what I was interested in. But like that definitely helped out for sure. Like if you're I think definitely like starting your own website even, or like starting like your own like blogs and to talk about things that you're interested in also helps. Like there's a myriad of things that people can do to get started, and it's never too early to start anything. Honestly, like it's that old saying that was what Abraham Lincoln said, like if I'm going to cut down a cherry tree in 6 hours, I'm going to spend the first 5 hours sharpening my axe. And like that is the kind of mindset that you need to have, and that's the kind of mindset that you need to have throughout your whole professional career, honestly. Like even when you get that dream job, even when you land that role, don't stop. It's never this industry is constantly evolving. Life is constantly evolving, and you need to be on top of that. Like you need to be a permanent forever student, and I think that mindset is also very important as well. And I know like that's asking a lot from a person, like especially like, you know, I'm normally a body at rest. Like I'm kind of lazy if I'm being honest. Like when I'm setting my ways, I'm setting my ways, but like also be open to change, like, and understand that as well. But yeah, like definitely start out at least 2 years, spend that first year networking as much as you can, and then figure out what jobs and how to meet those roles next.
The one thing I'll definitely reiterate to all of you out there that Eric just said is 2 years is definitely, if you go, wow, 2 years is a long time. It's not. It's going to go by real fast. And the biggest thing that you should be focusing on, especially for the majority, I would say 75% of that time, is literally just figuring out what you're going to be when you get out of the military. Because as you've heard in this conversation, your identity is going to go through a massive shift change. It's not just your work. It's going to be who you are as a person. Where does your family live? What are you going to do? What's your family going to do? Like, there's a lot of factors in there, and you should really be trying to answer as many of those questions as possible, because even if you get all of them right, and I'm speaking from experience here, even if you crush it, you're still going to experience some level of emotional damage from leaving the military. It's just going to happen. So I guess this will go into my next question, Eric. Like, outside of work, what have you done to really build up your identity as Eric Meng, the post-military person? Like, outside of you being a vet, like what do you do? What do you try and pursue on a daily basis that allows you to build up your identity outside of your job?
I mean, that's good. That's a very good question. And to be honest, I still try every single day and to try to answer that. I think I think putting more value into your relationships, and like focusing also on that is very, very important. Because you know, you are who your closest friends are. You are who your spouse is. You are who your family is. And that really defines your identity as well, more than anything else. Um, so work at those relationships. Like, I think a lot of people tend to like focus on their own career, focus on themselves, and like that's okay, but don't lose sight of like your community, because your community really is who's there for you no matter what. And at the end of the day, like if you really look at, you know, the span of our lives and this journey that we go through, who's there for you throughout the entire way? It's your spouse, it's your family, it's your close friends. And hanging out with them, spending time with them, putting emphasis and focus into making those relationships really good is very important, more important than anything else. Um, because those are the people that will bring you up, even if you are emotionally damaged, like you said, even if you go through those traumas and stuff like that. And so, and I still do that to this day. Like, I still try to make it a focus of, like, talk to my friends every day, talk to my family at least once a week, hanging out in person, even though as much of a, introvert I am, those are very important relationships to have. But outside of that, like, don't lose sight of the things that you also love doing. Like, if you enjoy playing video games, like, play video games, man. Play video games with your friends. Like, that's also a way to, like, socially interact with people. Like, you know, like, I have two dogs, so, like, I love going on hikes with my dogs. Like, that's something that, like, really defines me as well, because, like, it helps keep me grounded in being like, you know, they don't have that much time here, and so I need to make sure that every hour that I have free, every single weekend that's a sunny weekend, like, I make it a purpose to go out and, like, do stuff with them. And when you start really taking agency in those parts of your life, like, when you really start, like, planning that stuff out, like, even if you're a young person, like, you think your 20s are going to last forever, you think it's going to be a great time, and it normally is, but the 20s don't last forever, man. Like, eventually you're going to have that, like, one instant, and that's going to, like, break your back at the gym or something like that, and you're gonna be like, fuck, I'm old, like, I gotta, like, really, like, change the way I do my life. And like, you know it's just, it's life is just a journey, man. Like, that's really what it is at the end of the day, is like, this whole conversation around identity and around, like, figuring out who you are post military is incredibly important to have, because you know that really sets the pace for the rest of your life afterwards. Um, like, how do you pick up yourself by your bootstraps and figure out who you are in this new world? Um, and if you can set that pace right, you'll be set. You'll be fine. You'll be chilling. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world either. Like, I couldn't for the first year. Like, I got out. Like, I was still like, man, like, I'm making good money. I'm still in the government, but, like, this just isn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
So, like,
Why am I still
maybe I should.
sad? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
why am I still, like, why do I still feel empty, even though I'm, like, making good money? Like,
Yep.
even though all my basic needs are met.
Exactly.
I have a loving spouse, pets, friends, all that kind of stuff. Like, why do I still feel like there's something missing, right? And that's okay to have, and that's the thing that, like, that's a journey for you to answer, for you to go through those steps. It's the old saying of, like, you never know how sweet the sweet is until you taste the bitter. And so, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Any final pieces of advice for everyone out there, as they prepare for their transition, as they prepare for this just, like, very large shift in their world, life, and identity? Any final pieces of advice that you might give somebody?
Yeah. Don't burn any bridges. I think that is the biggest thing that, like, people make mistakes about, is, like, they think, like, they're never going to see a person again in their industry or whatever, and so they can tell them to fuck off and, like, tell them their true thoughts and stuff like that, and just burn that bridge. Don't do it. It's a small world out there. Also, like, everyone's going through their own battle, so, like, you don't know what that person is going through, and so, you may need to rely on them one day. One day you may need to ask for a reference from that person. One day you may be stuck on the side of the road, and they're the ones that come by and help you out. I think it's easy to lose perspective when you're in the moment, and, like, you're with a shitty coworker, and, like, you're like, man, I'm never going to see this person again, so I'm just going to burn this bridge and, like, tell them my true thoughts, or, like, whatever. Don't do that. Like, handle conflict. Handle it cordially. Handle it well. Like, being able to handle conflict and resolve conflict is a very important skill as well. But most importantly, if you can't do that, just don't burn that bridge. You'd be surprised, how often you'd run into the same people again, or even worse, not even worse, but or even crazier, like reaching out to them for help. It's that old saying where it's like, today it's you, tomorrow it's me, and if you help everyone out along the way and you leave good impressions everywhere you go, you're sowing the seeds for your own success in the future. And even if you never decide to like reap those rewards, that's completely okay. Like, you still left a good impression and you still left a connection open, and you never know like how many dividends that's going to pay out later.
Definitely.
So definitely don't burn any bridges. That's my last piece of advice. But thank you so much for having me on here,
bro.
Billy. It was definitely a pleasure talking with you again, catching up.
Of course.
And I definitely appreciate you inviting me on here. And I think this is really beneficial for everyone out there that's listening.
Hey, man, I'm glad that you could come on, and thank you so much for coming on, giving your advice, kind of burying yourself before all the people. Like, I mean, it's not easy to go out there and say that you go through hard times, but everyone in the vet community gets it, and we really appreciate you coming out and just giving everyone advice so that those future generations can get through it hopefully a little bit easier. So thanks so much, and everyone out there, see you on the next time on the Post Military Podcast.